We have lots to talk about in today's video, including the latest trade rumors around the NHL. Today's rumors focus on teams like the Canucks, as well as the Ottawa Senators and the New York Rangers. There's some interesting comments from Kaapo Kakko, was not happy about being a healthy scratch the other night and let his feelings be known. Sharks head coach Ryan Warsofsky has been fined. We have news on a potential contract extension between the Leafs and John Tavares. News from the NHL waiver wire. Plus, history has been made with the first Chinese-born player getting his NHL contract. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to discuss, all kinds of NHL news and some trade rumors as well. Let's get started first with a few quick hits here, starting with the news from the waiver wire. Yesterday, we had Minnesota Wild forward Devin Shore on waivers. He, in fact, did clear. Today, we have two new players on waivers, including Colorado Avalanche forward Chris Wagner and Devils forward Justin Dowling. So they'll both be available for pickup and can be claimed by other franchises up until 2 o'clock Eastern time tomorrow. We'll find out if indeed that happens, or they can be reassigned to their minor league affiliates. All kinds of other news around the league, including a couple of signings. One, which is a historical signing. The Winnipeg Jets today have signed one of their 2024 draft selections, Kevin He, and he becomes the very first Chinese-born NHL player to be under contract. So he gets his 3-year entry-level deal. Chinese-born, but obviously lived and raised in Canada, playing in the Ontario Hockey League. So that's pretty significant. We know the NHL has tried to grow the game globally, certainly having its impacts here. Like I said, he was born in, I believe it was in Shanghai, if I'm not mistaken. So Kevin He gets his 3-year ELC. The Calgary Flames tonight also announced a contract extension for defenseman Braden Pahal, who was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was a waiver pickup last year. He gets a 2-year extension, $1.187 million. So for, a pretty stable third pair guy, he's gets pretty valuable contract. They've been quite pleased with him. Pretty, solid, stable play, physical, kind of fits the bill for a third pair D, and for a Flames team that's been going through a retool here over the past couple of years. He was a nice pickup for them, and something that obviously doesn't come too expensive, but gets a lot of effective play in there. Some other news around the NHL, some injury updates. We got a bunch of tidbits here on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's start first with the positive news. David Kampf returns tonight. Be his first game since November the 16th. He's been out for quite some time. So Kampf has returned. They've sent Fraser Minten back down to the Toronto Marlies in the American Hockey League. Minten, I think, had a pretty decent run in his latest stint, but back to the minors he goes with Kampf coming back. And they get, I guess they were calling it positive news the other day on Anthony Stolarz, that it wasn't a major knee injury. There wasn't any, structural damage per se. But we found out today that after further testing on the knee, that Anthony Stolarz is going to end up having a knee procedure and will be out of action for approximately 6 weeks. So again, no structural damage, but they called it removing a loose body. There's kind of like a pebble or something in there that's loose and moving and causing some issues. So it's not the worst. It's not terrible. But, when you go from seeing him leave the game to wondering if it's serious or not, and hearing it's not overly serious, shouldn't be out too long, and then getting this, it's kind of like, oh, well, I thought it wasn't serious. 6 weeks is serious enough. And he's had numerous other knee surgeries in the past. So certainly something I'm sure he would have liked to have avoided. We'll have to see if Joseph Woll can kind of take the ball and run with it here. Hopefully he can stay healthy and have some solid play. That's been Woll's biggest issue as well. So as I mentioned before, I think that the Leafs have a terrific goaltending tandem. They have two guys that are very capable. Unfortunately, they both have injury pasts that are concerning. And, hopefully one of them at all times can stay healthy and keep the team steady between the pipes. This could very well spark the return of veteran goaltender Matt Murray. There was talk on TSN Insider Trading tonight saying that it could spark a return to the NHL for Matt Murray. Of course, Murray missed all of last season after undergoing hip surgery. Did get a couple games in, I believe, in the AHL late in the year. He's been in the American Hockey League to start this year. He did have I guess what we're hearing is a minor injury, but recently returned, and they want to see him maybe play a couple of games. I suspect they'll probably keep Hildeby up with the Leafs for right now, But if Murray can play a couple of games here, probably as early as this weekend, and can have a good showing, it's possible that they return Hildeby to the minors and bring Murray up. So we'll see how that goes. It's been a long time since Murray's had an NHL game, and be curious to see how things work out. Obviously, he re-signed for a cheap one-year deal, and as we always hear, injuries on one end creates opportunity for somebody else. So we'll see if he can make the most of it. Another quick update on the Leafs as well. There is talk about a John Tavares contract extension. I know in the offseason it was unclear how things were going to go. We've heard kind of off and on of the two sides talking, but again on TSN Insider Trading tonight, they were discussing the fact that the Leafs and Tavares' camp have been having dialogue and having discussions. It doesn't sound like anything is imminent at this point, that they're right now, all they said was that their goal is to get it done before he hits free agency. There's mutual interest for him to stay in Toronto. It's going to be a matter of getting the contract details hammered out. We know he's going to be making less money than the $11 million he's making now. It's believed they're looking at comparable contracts like we saw Anze Kopitar sign in Los Angeles and Claude Giroux sign in Ottawa. So probably something in that $6.5 to $7 million range, probably on a 2 or 3 year contract extension. It was mentioned that the Steven Stamkos contract of 4 years at $8 million was not something that was being considered right now. That might be a little bit too much money and too much term. They're trying to keep everything shorter and down a bit more closer to the other two guys that were mentioned there. So we'll see. Again, like I said, nothing's imminent, but there are ongoing discussions, mutual interest. We know Tavares has played relatively well this year. I don't know if he's extra motivated. I mean, you got to look at the fact that they took the C off of him, which I know he handled it very well, very gracious. But, no, I don't care what anybody says. It's a little bit of a shot to your ego. You've been the captain for quite a while. You're told they're going to pass it on to the next younger superstar, Austin Matthews. Plus, he needs a new contract after this year. So he's got multiple reasons to be extra motivated. And he's been playing well. So clearly, they see value in keeping him, of course, for the right price. So they're getting closer, but again, not imminent, but ongoing discussions at the very least, which is, I guess promising if you want him to see him stay in Toronto. Some other roster moves before we get into the rumor section. The Penguins today recalled defenseman Nathan Clerman. That's due to the Marcus Pettersson injury, who's listed as week to week. The Lightning today confirmed that defenseman J.J. Mosher is also considered week to week with a lower body injury. He had an awkward fall the other night. Going to be out for a little while. The Nashville Predators today had a few updates, including reassigning Fedor Svechkov to the American Hockey League. They've also confirmed for tonight's action that Roman Josi, Alex Carrier, and Jeremy Lauzon all remain out of the lineup. And of course, the New York Rangers also confirmed today that they've returned Connor Mackey to the American Hockey League, to their affiliate there as well. Some more news out of Montreal. The Habs management group, including Ken Hughes, is visiting in Russia to see Ivan Demidov. This is the second visit that they've paid him over there, kind of checking in, being able to see him play in person. Obviously, just to get a handle on things. I don't know if there's really any negotiating going on to try to, get him to North America any sooner. I suspect that, he's going to finish the season there, sign afterwards, and likely play in Montreal next year. I think that seems to be the plan, but I know that the team there is pretty adamant on, I think the coach there has kind of said, he'll go when he's ready type of thing. So we'll see. I'm not really sure there's much more to it than that, except for, keeping tabs on him, seeing how his development's going, seeing how the practices are going, see how the games are going, and just kind of, keep an eye on their top prospect and, someone who they feel has potential to be a future superstar in the NHL. We also got word today from the NHL that San Jose Sharks rookie head coach Ryan Warsofsky, who I believe he's the youngest coach in the NHL as well, has been fined $25,000 for what they deemed inappropriate conduct the other night, which it was Saturday against the Utah Hockey Club. Of course, the Sharks and Warsofsky were not pleased with the officiating. Obviously, there were some non-calls that were, they were unsatisfied to the point that obviously there was a lot of talking, yapping, complaining going on, and obviously went too far in the view of the NHL, so they've slapped him here with a fine. Now, on the rumor mill, we're going to talk about a bunch of teams here, including Vancouver, Of course, the Rangers, the Senators a little bit as well. We'll start with Ottawa. It's a bit of a quick hit. Doesn't really focus on specific players. Of course, we know the Sens have played some good hockey here as of late. As of right now, could change by the end of the night. But as of right now, they find themselves sitting in a wild card playoff spot. It's the first time that this deep into the season that they've been in a playoff spot since the 16-17 season, which was the last time they were in the playoffs and had a good run going to the Eastern Conference Final. I know they weren't expected to go that far, but the team did really well in the playoffs, had everything clicking, going the right way, and they probably overachieved a little bit, but they came within one goal going to the Stanley Cup, losing to the Penguins in Game 7, double overtime of that Eastern Final. It was super, super close. Of course, the Penguins went on to beat Nashville in the Stanley Cup Final, and I know a lot of Ottawa people feel like if they had gotten that goal in double overtime and went to the Cup Final themselves, that they could have beat Nashville as well and been a Cup champion before that team got completely dismantled. So we'll never know, though. Of course, that's just what I know some Sens people feel, but again, that's just an opinion that can never be substantiated. But as far as right now being in a playoff spot, I know reporter Dave Pagnotta was talking today in his latest video update, talking about if the Senators remain in contention, that he sees Steve Staios wanting to add to this team later in the year. He said it doesn't seem to be anything imminent. They're not out there, absolutely looking to make a move right now. Like I said, with the last 10 games, winning 7, I think they're 7-3 in their last 10. But they do have a very big road trip coming up. It's 9 games in total. It is broken up by the Christmas holidays, so they go and they play 4 here on the road, and they'll have a stretch off for the holidays, and then they go back out for, I believe it's 5 before they are home for a bit. So it's all because they have the World Junior Championships being hosted in Ottawa this year, so their arena, unfortunately, was not available for a good stretch of time there for home games. So this is kind of part of the process. Thankfully, they played some good hockey leading up to it in case the road trip doesn't go completely as planned. But, at the end of the day, it is what it is. They can't do anything about it. But Pagnotta says they're looking for 2 things. One, a top 9 scoring winger and a top 4 defenseman. Now, the scoring winger part kind of makes sense to me. The top 4 defenseman, not so much, because they do have Artem Zub that's out. But by the time, the time frame he's looking at here with his report suggests that you're probably looking at into January or February before they were really most likely make a move unless something goes horribly wrong. And at that point, they'll get Artem Zub back, who's a right shot top 4 defenseman, which is kind of what he said, so like a stay-at-home, defensive-minded guy, which is what they have there. So I'm not completely sold on the idea that they will do that unless they feel like they have an opportunity to maybe add a good veteran piece. Obviously, Bernard Docker's been playing the third pair with Tyler Clevin, and you know what? As of late, they've been actually quite good. We'll see how things go. If things don't continue that way, maybe they look to bring in a little bit more experience or to upgrade on, Travis Hamonic, who unfortunately is probably playing above his pay grade and playing way too much because of the Zub injury. But right now, things are kind of stable back there, and with Zub coming back, to kind of would reslot everybody, and it could be a case where they don't really need to make that move. But I know if there was a good stretch of time there as well where they weren't getting a lot of secondary scoring, the top guys were carrying the scoring chances, which were getting the job done a decent amount of the time, but there were certainly games that they didn't pick up the win when they weren't getting that extra scoring from guys like, Amadio, Cousins, Gregor, like your guys in your bottom 6. Pinto had a long drought as well. That's over. They've been actually getting good depth scoring here as of late with guys like Pinto, Cousins, Gregor, even Amadio getting more, a little bit more involved. Hasn't scored in a little bit, but a few assists and, good defensive play. That if they did want to add, it would have to certainly be an upgrade. And, I think the part of the issue too is David Perron has missed significant time this year. So they kind of have that in-house. If he can come back in the second half of the year and be productive, that's kind of like adding there too. So again, I'm not downplaying Pagnotta's report. I just think that there's stuff going on in-house with the Senators that if everything goes right and they stay healthy, that they might have their own guys coming back to kind of, eliminate the possibility of needing to go out and make a bunch of trades. He did again mention the fact that Josh Norris is one of the main top guys they seem okay with moving in the right deal if there's something, a major hockey trade type of upgrade. But again, I caution that. I don't know that's going to happen because of his contract. I think teams like Norris, but they're sketchy of it because of the injury he passed, and we will see. I don't know that Ottawa's going to do a lot in the short term here. Could Norris go? I guess it's possible. I don't know that there's going to be a big rush to do that. In New York, the Rangers, Kako made some interesting comments. Of course, he was a healthy scratch the other night. We know they've been on a downward spiral, a big skid. And, Kako made comments to reporters today saying that he was surprised by being a healthy scratch. He said he knows that they need to do something when they're losing, but he thinks it's easy to pick on a young guy. Now, of course, he's still 23. I'm not sure he's super young. Like, he's been in the NHL for going on 5 years, so it's not like he's brand new here. But, he is one of the younger guys on the team. There are younger, but, he is one of the younger ones, I guess. But he also said it's easy to pick on a young guy, to boot him out. And that's how I feel, to be honest. So we had heard before, just a report from, I think it was Steve Dangle, saying that his connections were telling him that Kako would really like a new destination and like to be traded. That's not the first time I've heard that. So I really think that some of those feelings are starting to come out in these comments here. Kako kind of reiterated that, he doesn't feel like he was the worst player. Like, he understands that he could play better, but he felt he was far from the worst. So why wouldn't you take somebody else out? It's kind of how he was feeling. So again, we'll see. We heard about the players only meeting where they discussed their concerns with GM Chris Drury. A lot of people push back on that, saying, you know what, these guys need to stop whining and just get on the ice and get the job done. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter how you feel about the GM. You need to play better, You might not be happy with how the Jacob Trouba situation was handled. You might not be happy with the fact that there's been some rumors leaked about what players might be available. But as a pro athlete, you need to learn to drown that out and just go play. And it's obviously easier said than done for some, but at this point, there is a lot of belief that Kako could be moved. I know on TSN Insider Trading, they were talking about the fact, I believe Chris Johnson said he feels that Kako may not necessarily move before the December 20th roster freeze that's coming up at the end of the week. But if he doesn't, then, maybe early in the new year, it wouldn't be surprising to see him move. I think there'll be lots of interest. I think he's played well enough to generate, a decent interest. I'm not sure they're going to get a big return, but at the end of the day, he was a former number 2 overall pick and still has a lot of untapped potential. And in Vancouver, again, I just want to reiterate some of the other rumors we've been hearing. Rick Dhaliwal, we got comments from him, comments from Pagnotta and Friedman. Dhaliwal did confirm what Friedman had said, that he does believe that the Sabres and Canucks did have conversations earlier in the year. Friedman on their show also reiterated again that what he said on his podcast about the Pettersson for Byram and Cousins trade was just him spitballing, but he does believe that both teams do have interest in each other's players, and that he does believe that they did have talks previously. Now, there was one insider, and I believe it was Darren Dreger from TSN, said he's checked in, and from what he's been told, there's nothing going on right now. And that very well might be true, because based on what Friedman and Dhaliwal are saying, that these talks that they've heard about were earlier in the season. Now, of course, Pagnotta says his report essentially said that the Buffalo Sabres had inquired on Pettersson before. Now, this was dating back a while before he signed his long-term contract with the Vancouver Canucks. We knew there was multiple teams that had actually had real conversations with them on a trade for Pettersson, and that the Canucks eventually used that as leverage to get him to sign, saying that, we need to know what your plans and intentions are, because we have legit interest in you. We have legit offers on the table that we're going to have to consider if you're not going to commit to staying. We got to know, because we got to know how to proceed here. And he ultimately ended up signing. Again, confirmation from both of those reporters that the Canucks definitely do have interest in Bowen Byram. Obviously, that could be the top 4 defensemen that they've been targeting. Lots of talk that the Canucks want to add on the blue line. Makes sense with the injuries they have back there. Dhaliwal also mentioned a couple of forwards that he believes they had interest in as well, which include Alex Tuch, which he says that they had interest in Tuch with Buffalo. But, of course, they've been told that he's probably not available. We know that there seemed to be some interest in Dylan Cousins, but, again, I think they're being very cautious with him. And he also mentioned that he believes, at the very least, that they've checked in with the Boston Bruins and Trent Frederick. Frederick would be a great add there as well. So, again, lots of inquiring in Vancouver, even if they don't do anything crazy about the Miller, Pettersson stuff that we've been hearing about. A top 4 defenseman and a winger, definitely something that's very much on their radar. We don't know what the Bruins are going to do with Frederick yet. Lots of talk that they could trade him. They may have trouble signing him. But I think as long as they're in playoff playoff contention, they're going to resist doing that and hold off, even if it means taking him into their past their deadline with them as an own rental. I think they need to, the Bruins are not going to be a team that weakens themselves going into the playoffs. At least I don't see that being something that they do. But, a guy like Byram having a lot of interest in Vancouver, something that they would have to be cautious of, the fact that he is RFA, pending RFA with ARB rights coming up. Does he want to sign long-term? Those are questions they need to answer before they probably make a move, because you don't want to, acquire him just to find out he doesn't want to stay. Because Friedman was saying the other day that he believes that Byram wants to be a number 1D at some point here in the near future with the team, and has to kind of feel comfortable that he's going to have a chance to be that with whoever he signs with his next contract. So we'll see what happens. So, of course, lots of chatter around Vancouver, lots of chatter around New York. We've heard lots about Buffalo in recent days. Some new stuff there on the Senators as well. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news or rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. Very busy time. I do expect and would be shocked if we don't see at least a little bit of trade activity before the end of the week when the roster freeze kicks in. So let me know what you think we'll see, and we'll discuss it in the comments. Thanks very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.